Well, awesome. Hey, good morning. All right. Well, I'm not sure if we should lower the expectations or what, but it is good to be with you today. Who would you say, who loves to run? It's okay. I mean, we're like this, but raise your hand a little bit higher. Like, this is good. We got a couple that's there. That's awesome. Very good. Well, my son is sick today. One of my sons is sick today, Jonas. But if you've seen him, he absolutely loves to run. Not just run, but run fast. That's his thing. Like the kind of fast where you wonder if something is chasing him at times. He trains for it almost every day, and it's actually incredible to watch just the development that has taken place within himself. Me? I'm more, I would call fair weather, casual. I got my running shoes on. I went for a little run this morning. I do a few miles, in the cool morning just to kind of wake up, enjoy the nature of it. Nothing really impressive. It was years ago, Jonas actually laps me time and time again. So that's the thing, though, I want you to know today is we're not going to talk about that type of running. We're going to talk about something, a different type of running. Because here's what I've noticed. Whether you love to run or you avoid it at all costs, most of us, we're running somewhere, right? Whether we know it or not, we're running someplace. Just not always in the way we can see it. Modern science calls it fight, flight, or freeze. It's our instinctive response to danger. Most of us aren't running from lions anymore, but we're still running. It's this human condition that exists inside of us to run. Sometimes we run physically, son runs physically, but more often we're running emotionally and spiritually. We run from things like regret, failure, shame, wounds we never asked for, disappointments, things we wish we could just simply change. So today I want to shift our focus because the power of the gospel has never been primarily about what we're leaving behind. It's about what and who we're running toward. Several years ago, my dad was diagnosed with colon cancer and given only a few months to live. I was right there in the hospital the night we found out. He went into surgery to do what we thought was very minor, only to find out he had stage 4 cancer. A few days later, Shelley and I went back to visit him in the hospital. We chatted about the farm, since I grew up on a farm, and just some other day-to-day things, and then said our goodbyes and headed out the room. Walking down the hallway, Shelley turned to me and said, I think you need to go back in and talk to your dad about his faith. Has anybody ever done an internal eye roll? You know what I mean by that? When my wife told me that, I was like, okay, I really don't want to do this. If there's one person, I can go to a complete stranger and talk about my faith, but the very one person, my dad, to talk about his faith, that's about the last person I wanted to talk. Just because it was just awkward. It was something, we grew up in church, but we didn't talk about our beliefs, especially our faith with each other. So I had just really a lifetime of reasons to keep walking out the door. And in all reality, I wanted to run. But by the time we got to the car, I still remember sitting in the car in the driver's seat. I had every reason. Hey, it's 2 hours, we got to get home. I got an early morning that I got to get, all those items of excuses of like, okay, but clearly the prompting of the Spirit was, Scott, you need to go back in. So I knew my wife was right. I could feel God prompting me, so I turned back and walked back in. I remember going down the hallway back to his room, and I'm like, okay, God, I need some direction right now. It was a slow walk. I was certainly not running back in there. It was like, okay, let's just take my time. I'm going to do this. And there was one question. And I was like, okay, I got one question. That's all I need, I guess. So I remember walking into the room, and my dad was a little bit surprised because he already said goodbye to me. And I remember sitting on the edge of the bed, and the one question I asked my dad, I said, Dad, how are you really doing through all of this? And it was in that moment, for the first time, I saw my dad weep. Through tears, he had said, Scott, this is the first time in my life I can't fix this, I can't control this, and I truly don't even know what to do, as he was sobbing. So sitting there beside him on that hospital bed, I told him about Jesus, how much God loved him, even through the pain of what he was facing, and how he didn't have to carry this burden alone. Because my dad spent most of his life trying to carry everything himself. He was running from vulnerability, running from need, running from the one thing that could actually hold him. And what I didn't fully understand yet was that God hadn't been waiting for my dad that day, hadn't just been waiting for my dad that day, he'd been watching the road for both of us. I'll explain more. Because to understand why that moment in that hospital room matters so much, we need to go all the way back to where humanity first started running, back to Eden. Because Eden is where humanity first ran away. Genesis paints a beautiful picture of a world exactly as God intended it. No shame, no fear, no hiding, no brokenness. Adam and Eve lived in a close relationship with God. The Bible even tells us they walked with God in the cool of the morning. Then in a moment, everything changes. Sin entered through a choice that has rippled across all the ages. The Bible doesn't just tell us, but I wonder what Adam and Eve thought when their eyes were opened to see both the good and the evil. Was it instant regret, shame, fear? What the Bible does tell is they began to sew fig leaves together to cover themselves and then hide when they heard God in the garden. Thousands of years later, not much has really changed, has it? Today, we don't hide behind leaves, or at least I'm not aware of that. What do we hide behind? Success. We hide behind busyness. We hide behind carefully managed versions of ourselves. Since the beginning of time, we have learned to run. We have learned to hide. We're in this series called Summer Playlist, and today's song is Run to the Father. It's a song about running, but not away from things. It's about running to our Heavenly Father. It's based, if you've heard the song, it's based on a story in Luke 15, most of us know as the prodigal son. But I want to make sure we hear what Jesus' original audience would have heard because it hits different and deeper than what we might expect at the surface. To our modern ear, we hear a story of a son asking his father for his inheritance early. And we picture this entitled kid who thinks he knows it all. He's rude, he's arrogant. But Jesus' audience would have heard something much stronger. In that culture, the inheritance came after the father's death. The son is essentially saying, I want what belongs to me, but I don't want you. I'd rather have your stuff than your relationship. I wish you were dead. The crowd would have been horrified. The father chooses to give his son the inheritance anyway. This would have meant possibly selling land and animals, putting the whole family at risk. I'm just trying to understand it in my own capacity. And what does the son do? He leaves, wastes everything, ends up feeding pigs. For some of us, we can relate to that son. I know there's parts of my own life. Yep. But yet he chooses to go back home. And on his way back, something else would have been weighing on him, something beyond what his father might say, if you can picture that. Because in that culture, there was a ceremony of village elders that they could perform called the kezahah. If a son lost the family inheritance among the Gentiles, that's exactly what happened, and he returned in disgrace, the village could publicly cut him off, shame him in front of everyone, declare he no longer belonged. So imagine the thoughts going through the son as he returns home. He's not just walking towards his father, he's walking towards judgment of a possible village who would be after him. Maybe some of us know that feeling. We're walking into a room wondering if God's disappointed, or my family's or my dad's disappointed with me. Wonder if we've gone too far. Wonder if there's still a place for you. Wondering if you're still wanted. So he rehearses his speech on the way home. He starts working out how he'll explain himself, how he'll earn his way back. Because that's how most of us think that's how it works, right? If I can just explain myself, if I can clean myself up, if I can do enough, be enough, if I can prove I've changed, then, and maybe then, I will be accepted. He's bracing for the worst. But then this story takes a turn the audience wouldn't have expected. In Luke 15:20, it says, while he was still a long way off, his father saw him. While he was still a long way off, his father saw him. And how did the father see him from that far away? Because he was watching. The son may have forgotten his father. The father never forgot the son. The son may have stopped thinking about home, but the father never stopped watching the road. And then Jesus says something that would have stopped the crowd cold. The father ran. Picture that. The father ran to the son. And know this, the patriarchs, they didn't run. Respected men in that culture, they didn't run. Running meant lifting up your robe, exposing your legs, humiliating yourself in public. Yet the father chose to run. He wants to reach his son before the village does. He wants to absorb the shame himself. He wants his son so back that more than of his own dignity, that he wants his own dignity. The son came home with a rehearsed apology. What he got instead? A running father. This same pattern of our father running is repeated again and again and again and again in the Bible. In Eden, Adam is hiding among the trees. In Luke 15, the son is hiding among pigs. Different story, same humanity. In Eden, the father comes looking. In Luke 15, the father comes running. Same father, same heart, same pursuit. And then we see this pattern one more time. Not in the garden, not in a parable, but in history itself. God doesn't just send a message. He comes in Jesus. The Father steps into the story personally. In John 14:19, whoever has seen me has seen the Father. This is the Father, son. Every healing, every forgiveness, every embrace, everything we read about Jesus, that's the Father showing his love. I just swiped something. Catalina, I'm going to need your help. I got into some music. Let me share a song with you. You got to like technology. I can go that. So think about in your life of the Father running, just try and capture that. Here's the thing. And like God calling out to Adam, like the Father running to the prodigal son, at the cross, the pattern reaches its full expression of the Father's love. The Father, through Christ, absorbing shame so his children can come home. So here I am, almost 20 years later, and I can still see that hospital room where I visited my dad very clearly. Two grown men. We were sitting on the edge of a hospital bed with our arms around each other, praying. My dad spent much of his life trying to carry everything himself. But in that moment, he chose to stop running away. He ran to the Father. And here's what I've come to understand since then, is that God wasn't only running toward my dad that day, he was actually running towards me too, as I thought about this some more. He was meeting me in that moment in my insecurity, in my fear, my awkwardness standing in that hallway, not wanting to go back. He was already watching for that moment, and he ran. Today's Father's Day, and I find myself certainly thinking about fathers. Thinking about my dad, a man who taught me the value of hard work and who in his final chapter of his life ran to the Father. If I could only try and even express the level of peace that he had in his final days, it was off the charts. Today I'm also thinking about my 4 boys. And I want them to know something. I'm proud of them, and I'm honored to be called their dad. Not because of what they've done, simply because they're my sons. And if I, an imperfect earthly father, can feel that way about my kids, imagine how your heavenly Father feels about you. That's just a glimpse of his heart. So as my son, I want to invite my son up, one of my sons, Noah, comes up to lead us and run to the Father, I want you to listen for this line. My heart has been in your sight long before my first breath. Let that sink in. Before your first breath, you were known. Before your first breath, you were loved. Before your first breath, you were seen. When you hid, the Father came looking. When you wandered, the Father kept watching. When you ran, the Father kept pursuing. The greatest truth today might not be that we run to the Father, It might be the Father has been running toward us all along. So together, let's run to the Father who knew you before your first breath. The Father who saw you while you were still a long way off. The Father who came looking in Eden. The Father who ran in Luke 15. The Father who stepped into history. The Father whose arms are still open today. Let this song be a prayer of your heart. And whenever you're ready, you can run to the Father.